If you have been keeping up with the financial news, you may have recently heard that now Deutsche Bank is having problems. Just like Credit Suisse had problems and Silicon Valley Bank, it looks like we're having some real difficulties in the worldwide economy. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The question is, it's not a matter of if there's going to be a financial crisis. The question is, when are we going to have a financial crisis? And it's going to be happening very shortly here in the next few months because of the Saturn transit. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what does Saturn mean? What does Aquarius mean? And what are the karmic factors? What is causing this crisis? Because if you watch the news, you're probably going to get a lot of little factoids. For example, the raising of interest rates and the bonds. That's the technical details, but what's the underlying karmic details? That's what I'm talking about today. So, for those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so you can get all of my updates, all my videos that are on the way. I do lots of videos on celebrities, the royal family, monthly predictions. I'm keeping up with this whole financial situation going on. So I do all types of videos. And I also do monthly predictions on important transits. I am doing a 40% off of readings using codename Thor on my website. Check down below for details. And also, I want to remind all of you, if you're interested in healing meditations to really remedy your karma, please subscribe to my new channel called Thor Spirit Teachings. And those are meditations that you can listen to really evolve your karma or really change your karma. So let's talk about Saturn in Aquarius, because this is really what we want to focus on during this time. This is the financial crisis. So we're seeing the early indications of this crisis right now. The first domino we really saw was on March 10th when Silicon Valley Bank literally suddenly just dropped, and then the federal regulators showed up in the morning because it went belly up pretty much overnight. Okay, so FDIC basically took over. So we're seeing more of these backstopping, is what they're calling it, of banks. So we're going to be seeing more of this, but this looks like it's spreading because now Deutsche Bank is having problems. And the central bank just announced that they're continuing to increase the interest rate. So they know that there's going to be a certain amount of jobs lost. They know that there's going to be a certain amount of economic devastation caused because of these interest rate increases. So let's talk about Saturn, because this is really what's causing the whole crisis as I see it. So Saturn and Aquarius, those of you that are new to my channel, Saturn entered the sign of Aquarius in the Vedic sidereal zodiac January 17th of 2023. So this is recent because Saturn takes 2.3 years to transit a sign. So this is a very slow transit. So a lot of times what we see is Saturn is going to bring in the very difficult karma, usually within the first 6 months of the transit. That's why I see this very powerful economic tsunami coming in at least by June, possibly sooner, more likely sooner, but we're going to see some sort of major economic crisis. Now, the first few months of the Saturn transit, it usually highlights some sort of problem that needs to be dealt with. So, if you think about the last transit when Saturn was in Capricorn and when it entered Capricorn in January of 2020, what happened in March of 2020? Well, you can fill in the blank there. So, Saturn is bringing up a series of new karmic obstacles, and it's never going to be a quick fix scenario. We're going to talk about why it's the economy and why I see it being economy, although the trigger point of this could be all sorts of different events. But we're going to see a major economic crisis, and we're already living it in many ways. So many of you are aware there's a cost of living crisis. There's inflation. Things are not very good for the average person right now. So this problem that's being introduced into the worldwide economy, it's not something that can be fixed very quickly. So 2023, 2024, we're going to be seeing a lot of struggle through trying to find an answer to solve this situation. So likely we're going to see continued inflation or stagflation. We're going to continue to be in this situation. And the government, because Saturn represents government, is going to be having to come up with new ways to deal with this crisis. Let me take you to the next slide so we can really talk about what Saturn is. Now, Saturn in your chart, on a personal level and a collective level, it represents heavy karma, limitation. It also represents survival fears. So above all else, Saturn is like the reptilian brain. It's concerned about survival. It's concerned about having enough food, shelter, water. So that's what Saturn represents. It also represents the basic structures of society. So Saturn is concerned with order. It wants order out of chaos. It's okay with hierarchies and institutions. It's even okay with having an elite. Okay, it's okay with pyramid structures and elites. However, this is going to be the big caveat, okay, because we've seen a lot of wealth inequality throughout the last few years. We've seen a lot of division. We've seen this wealth divide really start to emerge, okay, as the top 1% have really been taking a lot more of the resources, okay? This is what Saturn doesn't like. Saturn's okay with having an elite, okay? But Saturn cares about society as a whole. So it cares about the collective. If any of you are Star Trek fans, think of the Borg. That's kind of what Saturn is. Saturn cares about the whole, okay? It's okay for there to be some rich people, but the whole has to be okay. Okay, so for example, if the average everyday people, their basic needs are not being met, food, water, shelter, healthcare, that's when Saturn has no problem triggering a financial crisis. And that's what Saturn's going to be doing. Saturn's going to trigger a financial crisis. And Saturn will be forcing the issue to a head. So what I want you to be aware of is Saturn is, in a way, it's playing the role of a bad guy because it is bringing a lot of bad karma, but it's also going to make things better for the collective. Okay, it's forcing the issue to a head. So Saturn isn't always so bad. Saturn is creating this problem so that it needs to be fixed. It's going to bring it to a head. Like I said, Saturn cares about the whole. So I use the saying, sacrifice the one for the many. That would be a Saturn way of thinking. Okay, Saturn cares about the collective, even at the expense of individuals. Okay, so Saturn's not as much concerned about individualism or individual rights. It's more about the collective. How is the collective going to survive through this new transition? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. We're in this transition of technology and so forth. So Saturn is a survivalist, but it wants the basic needs of all human beings on the planet to be met as a whole. Let's talk about Aquarius. Okay, Aquarius is the natural 11th house. And the 11th house, like I'm saying in the slide, it's the economy, it's the marketplace. 11th house does represent things like capitalism as a whole. It also represents the everyman. It represents the masses. It even represents political rallies. So when Saturn's coming into this sign, that's where it's bringing the karmic problems. Okay, so the karmic problems are affecting the everyman. It's affecting the masses. It's affecting society at large. So this economic crisis, it's also bringing problems in the economy and the marketplace. So these are really causing problems. Saturn in the 11th house also means political protest, political rallies, political unrest. So what we see happening in France right now, we're likely going to see more of that worldwide over the next year. We're going to be seeing a lot of mass protests. This is about the masses getting together. And Saturn is really encouraging this, by the way. Saturn's encouraging the masses to, make some changes, systemic changes in their societies. So the difficulty is being brought to all these segments of society. And that's what the crisis is. Now let's talk about the problems, because you are already seeing it. You're already been seeing the problems for the last few years, but what Saturn is doing is just bringing it to a head. So it's this banking crisis. It's this credit crunch. It's this inflation. Okay. What have been the problems that have been in society for the last few years? Well, there's been inflation and increasing wealth inequality. So Saturn's very concerned about that. There's been increased decadence at the top of the social pyramids, causing the lower parts of the pyramid to suffer. Like I said earlier, Saturn is okay with an elite. Saturn is okay with a certain amount of decadence, but not at the expense of the whole. Okay, so that's where Saturn is going to bring the crisis, the problem. And that's what's happening right now. So, what you're seeing right now is the beginning of the crisis where it's trying to, if you want to think of it as like level the playing field or try to bring more fairness, that's what Saturn is doing. Now, what are we going to see over the next 2 years, and especially in 2024? Remember, Saturn is very slow to respond to these situations. So let me back up just for a second. The crisis that we're likely to see is likely to be a crisis that comes on very suddenly. Okay. But Saturn is, in Vedic astrology, it's considered the slowest moving planet because they don't use the outer planets. Okay. In ancient Vedic astrology, they only use the planets that are visible to the naked eye. So Saturn was considered the most outer planet in ancient Vedic astrology. So Saturn is a very slow planet. It moves slow. That's why you see slowness in hierarchies. Whenever there's some change that needs to be made within corporations or governments or institutions, Saturn is very slow to change. You'll notice that it takes forever for companies, corporations, governments to change policies or laws. It takes forever. And usually it's way overdue when it happens. So we're likely to see a crisis emerge, and the response is going to be very slow. The response is actually going to be painfully slow, where people know that something needs to be done. Okay. So that's where I see a lot of the solutions in this slide coming in more in 2024. 2023 is going to be a little bit of a struggle for a lot of us. Okay. So I want to really, raise the alarm bell there for you, not in a fearful way, but to get you kind of thinking about what's happening on a karmic level. Okay. This isn't meant from a state of fear. This is meant from the world has been in a state of imbalance, and Saturn is trying to restore balance. That's what Saturn's trying to do right now. So, what are we going to see as far as governments? Well, Saturn represents government intervention. So, those of you that are free market capitalists, that is not going to be happening over the next 2 years. There's going to be massive government intervention. Saturn is the government. Saturn is the collective. It's large institution hierarchies. It is not laissez-faire capitalism. Okay. So there's going to be massive government intervention over the next 2 years, even if there has to be a financial reset, whatever the government has to do to stabilize things and try to bring order back. That's what the government's going to do with Saturn transiting the sign of Aquarius. So we're likely going to be seeing, and not at the moment because of the interest rate rising, we're likely going to see eventually government stimulus, government stabilizing of markets, government assistance programs being launched, whether that be food, health, housing. We're going to be seeing new ideas, and we're going to be seeing something like a New Deal. I feel like there's going to be either a New Deal program for those of you that are not American. FDR, one of the great presidents in the US, is one of the presidents credited with bringing Social Security and these social safety net programs. We're likely going to see more social safety net programs being brought to the fore. Okay. We're likely going to see, and maybe not right away, but the introduction of a central bank digital currency or a UBI at some level to help with the loss of jobs due to AI and automation. So those of you probably are already aware, many of you, that with things like Chat GPT, look at that. I mean, it's already going to be giving someone the power to write, the amount of writing that maybe 5 people would write, one person can do using Chat GPT. So AI and automation are going to cut the jobs. And so there needs to be something to stabilize what's going to be happening to the collective during this time. So that's where we're going to see a lot of ideas coming out with the central bank digital currency or a universal basic income. And I'm not saying this on a political level. I know Andrew Yang brought up the freedom dividend in the Democratic, when they were having their primaries last time, but he was bringing up some important points. This is the next 10 years. There's going to be problems. There's not going to be a need for things like truckers because they're just going to be self-driving trucks. There's not going to be a need for a lot of jobs. Even if you go to a fast food restaurant, it's literally going to be you tap on a touch screen and it's just an automated process that gives you a hamburger. So that's one of the issues that's going to be over the next 10 years. So expect a lot more government invention and radical ideas. Okay, so Saturn is not going to allow society to go to zero. Okay, that's what I want you to know. So no matter how bad you see things get, Saturn is not going to allow things to go back to zero. Saturn is literally going to come in with some sort of program or something to really save the day. Although it might be slow, it might be even a little late in bringing it. Maybe it should have responded sooner. So we're going to be seeing a lot of global unrest as a result of this economic crisis. So I'm trying to give you a bigger picture view of what's going on. And this is coming up. I mean, right now we're seeing the beginnings of it. 2 weeks ago with the banks, we're seeing the early signs of it. So be prepared. Over the next few months, there's going to be a crisis. It's going to be an economic crisis, and it's going to be a very intense one. And it's going to be one of those crises that there is a sea change in how we behave as a society. It's going to affect how we work, how many hours we work. It's going to affect how we earn our money. All those things are going to be up for debate over the next 2 years. So what you see happening in France right now is going to be worldwide. So that's something to think about with this Saturn transit, and that's the underlying karma. Now, part of the karma is that the universe does not exist in a vacuum. When things get stagnant for too long, when societies stagnate, there's a renewal, there's a rejuvenation that takes place so that society can tap back into its divine creativity again, and it can begin to thrive again. So that's really what's happening on a metaphysical level. So thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And I will definitely be keeping up with this whole financial crisis and bringing out more videos, of course. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.